So I wanted to talk today about something different, and I wanted to talk about a spontaneous subject that I wouldn't have any limitations in discussing. And I found that the thing that I'm constantly drawn to, the thing that I feel I want to talk about more, is the world in which we live. Now, I know that I'm not alone in that I've had conversations with people, with strangers and with friends, in which the topic of life comes up. And then as soon as you start to talk about the way life is now and the way the world is now, all of a sudden, there's just this emergence of this pessimism and malaise that comes out of people. People seem to be talking about the way things are or the way they ought to be. Because whenever anything occurs, there's so much noise on the outskirts of the reality of the event that it overwhelms and takes over the real thing. And this excess seems to me to be halting people to be able to live like normal human beings. I suppose right now I'm talking about a lot of different things at once, but what I'm attempting to talk about more than anything else is to just paint a picture of our modern age. But the only barrier being with that is that when you start to talk about it, no one really agrees on where we are or where we're going, and things are moving so fast that people just can't keep up with it. Everyone is scared of the future, and people don't trust each other, and exploitation occurs across the globe, and all of that. I'm talking about all those things, but what I essentially wanted to explore was, what's the purpose in anything? What's the point of doing anything? Why create in an uncreative world? It's very easy to say that everything is dying, because if you look around, everything is dying. But paradoxically, I both believe and oppose this point of view. Now, why everything is dying should be quite obvious. I could sit here and spend the time preaching about why you should delete your social media. I don't have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and I won't get whatever comes out next because I don't need it, and I'm not missing out on anything by not having it. But human beings far too often surround themselves with this all-encompassing noise and stimuli that it drives them to insanity. And the problem is that nearly everyone does it. Even knowing that it's wrong, they still do it. Everything that we seem to do as a species would lead you to believe that we're very entropic. I'll give another example. The major thing and the only thing that anyone really knows about me is that in some way I am involved in the arts at some level. And yet I actively avoid contemporary art, and I would encourage everyone else to do so. For the most part, you should never be out of touch with the world, otherwise you're unable to communicate with it, and you're incapable of you're incapable of instigating any sort of actual change that you may want to see. And there is still stuff out there now that's great, that's being made. But to know that there are people, especially in the arts, that are entering their fields and have no idea how to communicate with the area that they claim to love. Film students that have never seen a film by Bresson or Dreyer or Buñuel. Writers in the English language that have never read a play by Shakespeare. Musicians that don't even know how to listen to music, let alone make it. And yet to hyper-focus on the contemporary means that you only converse with these people. That becomes your only source of reference, and that's what your discourse is built upon. If you can't refer in your own mind to the transcendental beauty of humanity, then you can barely think, you can barely create anything worthwhile. It's as though we've reset to year zero, and the knowledge of everything that came before is disregarded. But you can't understand humanity if you don't have the reference of antiquity, if you don't have in your mind Dante and Chaucer and Bosch and Michelangelo. And because we've removed so much of this intrinsic knowledge, while at the same time democratized information via the internet and social media, everything, especially in this case the arts, has suffered. Martin Scorsese had a great essay called Il Maestro, and in it he's discussing how growing up, the cinema was this grandiose, larger-than-life entity that surrounded him. He could walk through neighborhoods in New York and he'd be greeted with the posters and the advertisements of a new film by Bergman and Fellini and Antonioni. There would be the work of Stan Brakhage around, and there would be theatres that were sold out for this. And yet that same thing, just over time, as time has progressed, has been diluted and pillaged for everything it's worth. And what we're left with now is this thing of it, this shell of it, called content. And the thing is, this applies across the board. This works with everything. It reminds me of one of the conversations in My Dinner with Andre, when the two characters are sat with one another and they're speaking about theatre. And one of them, being a theatre director, says to the other, 20 years ago, a play this low, this inept, nobody would have even thought about going to see it. And yet now they flock in droves and they proclaim it as a triumph. When did this happen? But the thing is, this is what happens. When you create a world where we can get what we want when we want, all of a sudden everything appears boring. But at the same time, all this new stuff gets this veneer that it's shiny and cool and new. And so a lot of people pay attention to the new stuff and forget about the old stuff. Before you know it, people only know about the now. And so we uphold the most incoherent artists as bastions of the form. And it reaches a point where all external elements of art are valued higher than the aesthetic merits. We're supposed to measure art as one's virtuosity alongside one's imagination. An understanding of true aesthetic is what makes art transcendental. But now we care more about the person attaining an iconic status, and whatever work they make comes second. It's become so easy to proclaim something as an instantaneous classic or as a triumph with no understanding of any sort of aesthetic. Shakespeare is a triumph of aesthetics. Beethoven is a triumph of aesthetics. And even in contemporary circles, Cormac McCarthy, Björk, Michaël Haneke, these are all triumphs. Beyoncé is not this. These writers and these so-called visionaries are just posturing the brand of themselves as a substitute for an artist. The prioritization of a piece's social service over its aesthetic utility minimizes the actual purpose of what art is. But of course this is the case. This is the era of celebrity culture. It's the love of grinding for money. It might not be a good foundation for any kind of virtuous living, but it's passive entertainment, it's drama, it's news, it's scandal, it's whatever. For those that have followed me for a while, you'll know that I never wanted to be a YouTuber. What I wanted to do was make art. But in the meantime, I wanted to create things that could educate or maybe enlighten. But I wanted to raise the discourse to an appropriate level. But even in the short time that I've been doing this, these landscapes have changed dramatically. Now you don't do anything unless you can make excessive money from it. This is one of the reasons that we don't take sponsorships anymore. It's because placing money over everything just dilutes any message that you want to send. But we think that it's become unsustainable to create things as it's impossible to make if you don't join hands with these mega corporations that will fund you. Like they give a shit about anything that you're making. Listen, we're taking every sponsorship off every video that we've ever done down because the world has enough advertisements. Everything that's out now is just pushed as a product and as a commodity. Fucking people walk down the streets with their favourite dead designer's name plastered across their chest. People are spending their lives working pointless middleman jobs, spending more time there than they are with their actual family to buy shit that they don't need. Guys that are willing to walk around with another man's name on their underwear. The idea of making something like this, something like I do, without playing the game or finding ways to make it hyper monetizable, it's almost an impossible feat. People often ask me what I do. If I'm talking to them and I explain about cinematic retrospectives and history of art and all things like that, and they're interested, they give me a look like what I do is strange, and that's fine. But when they start to ask me about audiences and views, all of a sudden, people are hyper invested in what I do. People have become so caught up in making money first and then working around it. Everything that I do, everything that I'm building my life around, is to find my passion, to find what drives me, and then find a way to make that work. It's just very hard to discuss and even explain this to people because it's not very often that people care much about ideas or about creation. It's just, can I make money from it? And I always hear people saying to me, I need to earn money first before anything else. But the thing is, if I thought like that, then I wouldn't have created this and I wouldn't have created most of the other things in my life. Because making money online is scarily easy, but maintaining integrity and having a code is something that's much more easily discarded. And the two don't very often align. And in an age where it's looking like influencer boxing is going to be one of the few careers that are actually going to be left, I'd like to think that I don't have to sacrifice my work or my values. And I'd rather pick that first. I'd rather do that before selling myself out for a paycheck. But the thing is, make money. I don't want to give the idea that because of this, I desire some utopian ideal wherein everyone is supplied for and everyone is happy. I don't believe that. I mean, if you have a Venn diagram, I'm somewhere between a law and order, libertarian, objective, syncretic, anarcho-primitivist. Whatever that intersection is, that's where I am. Because God forbid I don't give full context to every belief I hold. Just in that alone, I'll have inevitably gone against someone else's beliefs. But that's a part of everything that I'm saying. When you operate by this world's rules, everything you say and everything you do is on such a knife's edge. And this endless self-branding that a person is the product has spread to people's personal lives. Because that's all anyone thinks of now. How am I going to look in the eyes of others? And it's difficult because of that for anything today to be received with sincerity. And to a certain degree, I understand why. These newer generations have grown up in an era in which they have less agency to control their own destiny than most human beings that have ever lived. And the result of a coping mechanism is that irony and cynicism are bound to emerge. But this is still no excuse to not take hold of the little degree of power that you have and utilizing that agency to the best of your ability to do something good. Because as I said, although everything is collapsing, at the same time, I don't believe this. Outside of this very, very shallow online presence that I have a life. I do martial arts and I grow my own vegetables and I'm married. And I could show off all of these great aspects for people in order to give myself a very brief sense of satisfaction. But it doesn't matter. None of this matters. And when you remove yourself from this modern picture of chaos that's painted and step away, everything's fine. Do I think that modern society is a hellscape? Yes. And the longer it goes on, the more damage it will do to the world and its people. So I would like it to end. But I also simultaneously believe that if you choose to engage in this surrogate world wherein you replace all of your relationships with parasocial dynamics, where you yourself are a brand, an advertisement, complying to the lowest common denominator, and you buy your personality and you don't read, then yes, the entire world must look awful. But if you look through nature and the ability and the abundance that there is, if you look through the history of humanity and see the incredible feats that has been made, not because of people's hardships, but despite them. Because you don't need to be relevant and you don't need this superficial edge to be cool. If you really want to be cool, that's not it. Stop caring about these fake surface level things. Exit this slave mentality and gain real skills. Connect with real people. Ignore the noise. Our world is run by people that want to have money and power over anything else. And it's fueled by a lack of knowledge. It's fueled by ignorance. It's fueled by stupidity. To use the Fran Lebowitz quote, think before you speak and read before you think. We're told time and time again that things have to be a certain way. And your life has to be a certain way. And you need to buy these things, and you can only do things like this. And everything that doesn't abide by that is seen as extreme behaviour. But what's remained in this world are the products of those so-called extreme people that went against the status quo to make something beautiful, to make something everlasting. I'm just trying to break through this barrier, and it might be impossible. But I'm trying to not put up any sort of veneer because I don't do that in my life. And it's almost an impossible thing to do online because everything that people display about themselves, about them being a brand in and of themselves, everything has to be calculated. And the way that they say things and the things that they say is very controlled. And that's stupid. It's pointless. There should be no barrier in which you have to alter and create these various personas so that you can speak to different people in different areas of life. People treat this online realm like it's separate from reality. And I get why, because the very nature of it is very unreal. But it's tiring. Everything's it's too fake. And you'll never be able to reach the heart of people and find what they're really about, find who they really are, and build from that. Because that's the story of humanity. It's what people really are. I don't like seeing too often that who people really are is hidden under all these strange layers, this big structure that they create around them, which is so controlled and so manufactured. I mean, everything in this world is manufactured. Everything is a product. Everything is a brand. And that's how people speak, and that's why I'm speaking off the cuff, so that I can just break this veneer and show that people are just people. Your work might be incredible. What you make might be amazing, and that's what we should pay attention to, because that's your abstraction. That's the expressionistic symbol of what you are. I know that in my time doing this, initially when I was much younger, I cared about this stuff. But I still see people older than me, and I see people coming up now, a younger generation, that are very different. And no one seems to be growing out of it. No one seems to want to step away from the internet, and no one wants to just let their ideas speak for themselves. They'll put an idea out there and then have to explain it to its most minute detail, and even, God forbid, even alter it for the sake of other people. I mean, if that's the case, then what's the point in making anything? What's the point in having any abstraction if everyone requires absolutist approaches to it? They need to understand everything before they can make this clinical decision about whether it is good or bad. It's such a binary decision, and there's no room for nuance. Who knows? I am just going on now, but I think it's because these sort of things I'm not going to mention again. I definitely want to discuss the things that I'm interested in and share them with people, because that's part of expanding your ideas. But definitely these realms that we've set up, especially in today's age, they're either echo chambers or they're modes of communication which you can never take seriously. It's very hard to progress an idea like that. But it's very important at the same time to bounce your ideas off of people. And that's what I'm trying to create. That's what we're trying to create here. Something that isn't influenced by the structures that currently exist. In that even the idea of discourse, even the idea of how I'm supposed to speak to a person has already been preordained, that it has to be done a certain way. They're all just things to think about. In regards to what we do here, in regards to the cinematography, our stuff was never content. But the constraints we allowed on our work in order to get sponsorships or meet contracts and so on never meant that we were entirely free. If we are after true freedom, a purpose to everything that we're doing, then we need to take a step backwards from today's society, because it's not going to stop on its own. I haven't even mentioned the inevitable catastrophe that will be AI. But this doesn't mean that we have to go along with it. We consume more things than we create. Art, food, our basic resources. But we are an industrious species that can be sufficient on its own merit. As I said earlier, this isn't a preaching video, because I accept that I can't actively change what people do. Can I give them tools and guidance to achieve things? Maybe, maybe not. All I do know is that people at some point have seemed to care about my opinion on cinema. Beyond that, who knows? Maybe if there's anything that I can offer from this, it's spend more time in silence and figure out who you are. Gain some self-esteem. Say and do the things that you know aren't just right, but are virtuous. Part of the reason why I wanted to talk today is because in order to live this life that I'm yapping on about means to fully embrace one's own creative potential. And so the cinematography is going to be changing and transitioning into only making art. And that process has already begun. Myself and my wife, we've been utilizing our time to hone our skills and actually create things. And to all those that have supported us in the meantime, that have supported us through here, that have supported us through Patreon, thank you, because you're actually making it possible, improving that you can make something completely worthwhile and genuinely meaningful without betraying your own convictions. To all those that have been coming over or will be coming over, we're glad to see and read all of your messages, and it's nice to know that there are people that share this view. I suppose this summarizes one of the points that I'm saying, because most people will probably watch this video in the middle of a bunch of other content. Most people, I imagine, probably won't even make it until the end, which is, it is what it is. I just want us all to take time to pay attention to the things that we want to do, and that we think and look outside and see how much potential we have. If you're interested in the art that we'll be making, stay in touch, and I'm sure we'll see you soon. But in the meantime, you take care.